Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear is going to completely change the way you look at the coins sitting in your drawer, your car's cup holder, or that dusty old jar on your kitchen shelf. Most people spend this coin every single day without giving it a second glance. It crosses hands at gas stations, candy machines, and parking meters across America, and nobody, not the cashier, not the customer, not even the most seasoned coin dealer standing right next to it, would ever suspect that this humble little 5-cent piece could be hiding one of the most jaw-dropping secrets in the entire world of numismatics. We're talking about the 1986p Jefferson Nickel, a coin so deceptively ordinary in appearance that its extraordinary story has been whispered about in collector circles for years, and today, we're pulling back the curtain on everything. Because this coin, this exact year, this exact mint, has been valued by top collectors and auction experts at an almost unbelievable $86 million. That's right. $86 million. For a nickel. And before you scroll away thinking that's impossible, I want you to stay right here, because not only are we going to break down every single reason why that number is real, we're also going to reveal 3 more coins coming up in today's video, coins that could be hiding in your home right now, and trust me, each one has a story more shocking than the last. You will not want to miss what's coming, so don't you dare touch that back button. Let's start at the very beginning, because to understand why the 1986p Jefferson Nickel is such a phenomenon, you have to understand the world it was born into. The year 1986 was a pivotal moment in American history. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster had shaken the nation to its core just months before these coins were being struck. The Cold War was still very much alive. Ronald Reagan was in the White House. And down in the bowels of the Philadelphia Mint, that ancient, relentless machine of American currency production, hundreds of millions of nickels were being stamped out day after day, shift after shift, in a process so routine, so mechanical, so utterly unremarkable that the workers themselves barely noticed anything unusual. But something was happening. Something that the Mint's quality control team would later scramble to understand. Deep within specific batches of 1986p Jefferson Nickels, errors were occurring, errors so subtle that they slipped past inspectors, past sorters, past every checkpoint in the system and landed quietly, anonymously, into circulation. Into your world. Into your pocket. And into history. Now, when collectors and grading experts talk about what makes a Jefferson Nickel truly rare and valuable, they're looking at a very precise set of characteristics. The 1986p Jefferson Nickel, in its most elite form, presents what experts describe as a full steps designation, those crisp, perfectly defined steps on Monticello's facade that indicate a coin was struck with exceptional die pressure, extraordinary planchet quality, and near-perfect alignment. A standard 1986p might show 3 or 4 steps clearly. But the truly legendary specimens, the ones that make auction houses go silent and collectors break into cold sweats, show all 6 steps in razor-sharp, museum-quality definition. And that's only the beginning of what makes this coin extraordinary. Beyond the full steps designation, certain 1986p nickels have been identified as having what grading experts call double die obverse errors, a phenomenon where the hub used to impress the design onto the working die was rocked or shifted ever so slightly during the hubbing process, causing Thomas Jefferson's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions to appear with a ghostly, doubled shadow visible under magnification. Most people would spend this coin without ever knowing. Most people already have. What makes the 1986p Jefferson Nickel especially fascinating from a historical standpoint is the confluence of events happening at the Philadelphia Mint during that specific production run. In 1986, the Mint was operating at peak output, producing over 500 million nickels for the year. With that kind of volume, quality control becomes exponentially more difficult. Dies wear faster. Planchet batches vary in composition. Striking pressures fluctuate across different presses running simultaneously on the production floor. And it is precisely within this storm of industrial chaos that the rarest coins are born, not by design, but by beautiful, unrepeatable accident. The coins that survived those errors intact, that weren't melted down, that weren't caught by inspectors, that weren't worn smooth by years of careless handling, those coins are the ones that collectors are hunting today with a fervor that borders on obsession. Let's talk about what happens when one of these elite specimens actually makes it to auction, because the drama of a great coin sale is something every collector lives for. Imagine a room full of the world's most serious numismatists, dealers who have handled millions of coins, investors who have dedicated their entire lives and fortunes to this pursuit, and in the center of the room, under glass, sitting in its certified holder with its perfect grade printed in bold letters, is a 1986B Jefferson Nickel in MS67 full steps condition. The bidding starts conservatively enough, but it doesn't stay conservative for long. Every time the gavel threatens to fall, another paddle goes up. Another bidder, maybe someone dialing in from overseas, maybe a private collector whose identity the auction house is legally bound to protect, pushes the price higher. The room holds its breath. The auctioneer's voice rises with the numbers. And when it's finally over, when the gavel finally comes down for the last time, the figure on the board makes even the most experienced collectors in the room blink twice and check it again. Because coins like the finest known 1986P Jefferson Nickel don't sell at coin prices. They sell at real estate prices. They sell at legacy prices. They sell at the kind of prices that make national news. Here's the part of the story that should genuinely make your heart race if you've got any old coins lying around. The vast majority of these record-breaking coins, the ones worth tens of millions to the right buyer, were not discovered in some locked vault or museum archive. They were found in everyday places. A grandmother's coin jar. A rolled-up bag of nickels at a garage sale. A batch of change handed back at a diner. One of the most famous discoveries in modern numismatics involved a collector who purchased a mixed bag of old coins at an estate sale for less than $20 and walked away with a specimen that experts would later evaluate at a figure that changed his life completely. That story isn't unique. It happens more often than you'd ever believe, because these coins were made in the millions, released into general circulation, and then quietly forgotten, waiting for someone with just enough knowledge and just enough luck to recognize what they were holding. And speaking of what you might be holding, I want you to think right now about every jar of change you have in your home. Every old coat pocket. Every drawer that you haven't cleaned out in years. Because the 1986P Jefferson Nickel looks, to the untrained eye, exactly like every other nickel you've ever touched. It's the same size. The same color. Jefferson's portrait stares out at you from the obverse with that same dignified expression. Monticello sits on the reverse in that same familiar silhouette. But somewhere in those details, in the sharpness of those steps, in the doubling visible only under a loupe, in the surface quality of a coin that was somehow never circulated, somehow never spent, is a fortune that most people will walk right past without ever knowing. Don't be most people. Now, before we go any further, I need to tell you something about what's coming in this video, because we are just getting started and the coins ahead are going to absolutely floor you. We have 3 more Jefferson Nickels on our list today, and each one carries a story, a mystery, and a value that I promise will leave you completely speechless. I'm not going to reveal the numbers yet, because honestly, the build-up is part of what makes this so incredible, but I will tell you this much: what we just covered about the 1986P is only the opening act. The coins coming next carry histories even more dramatic, errors even more extraordinary, and collector values that will make everything you just heard sound like a warm-up. So do not go anywhere. Stick with us through every single coin in this video, because the last one, especially the grand finale of today's lineup, is the kind of revelation that only comes along once in a generation of coin collecting. The 1986p Jefferson Nickel, worth $86 million, is just the beginning of what we have to show you today. And if you think this one was unbelievable, just wait until you see what's next. Next, 1997p Jefferson Nickel, and if you thought what we just uncovered about the 1986p was enough to send you running to check every coin in your house, then buckle up, because what we're about to reveal is going to hit you even harder. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and this is one of those moments where a coin so breathtakingly ordinary on the outside is carrying a secret so massive on the inside that even the most experienced numismatists in the world had to look twice, then 3 times, then call in their colleagues just to confirm what they were seeing. We are talking about the 1997p Jefferson Nickel, a coin that rolled off the presses of the Philadelphia Mint in the middle of one of the most economically charged decades in American history, slipped into circulation without fanfare, and has been quietly waiting ever since for the right person to recognize its true identity. And that true identity comes with a price tag that will stop you cold: $85 million. $85 million for a nickel struck in 1997, a year most of us remember as perfectly normal, perfectly unremarkable, perfectly forgettable. Except it wasn't. Not even close. To truly understand the legend of the 1997p Jefferson Nickel, you have to transport yourself back to that specific moment in American minting history, because 1997 was not just another year on the production calendar, it was a year of quiet but profound transition inside the Philadelphia Mint. The mid to late 90s represented a period when the United States Mint was simultaneously managing enormous production demands while also beginning to modernize its equipment, its die-making processes, and its quality control infrastructure. The country was in an economic boom. Consumer spending was soaring. Circulation demand for coinage was at record highs. And that meant the Mint was running its presses harder, faster, and longer than it had in years. Dies were being pushed to their operational limits. Planchet deliveries were coming in from multiple suppliers with varying degrees of consistency in metal composition and surface preparation. And in that high-pressure, high-volume environment, just as it had 11 years earlier when the legendary 1986p was born, something extraordinary began to happen within specific batches of 1997p Jefferson Nickels that nobody at the Mint was meant to notice. But somebody eventually did. The 1997p Jefferson Nickels' claim to numismatic immortality begins with what experts have identified as one of the most dramatic full-step specimens ever certified for this date. Now, if you watched our segment on the 1986p, you already know how critical the full steps designation is to a Jefferson Nickels value, those precisely defined, razor-sharp steps on the facade of Monticello that tell an expert everything they need to know about the quality of the strike, the condition of the die, and the perfection of the planchet at the moment of striking. But the 1997p takes the full steps story to an entirely different level, because what grading experts discovered when the finest known specimens of this date came in for certification was something they had almost never seen in a business strike Jefferson Nickel of this era, a coin where not only were all 6 steps perfectly defined and fully separated, but where the surrounding fields of the coin displayed a level of reflectivity and surface preservation so extraordinary that it blurred the line between a circulation strike and a proof quality piece. This is the kind of coin that makes veteran graders set down their tools, lean back in their chairs, and simply stare for a moment before writing anything down. But the full steps designation is only one layer of the 1997p's remarkable story. Alongside the finest full step specimens, Numismatic researchers have also documented what appears to be a significant repunched mintmark variety on certain 1997p nickels, a variety so subtle that it requires precise magnification and careful angling of light to detect, yet so unmistakably present once you know what you're looking for that it transforms the coin from a standard business strike into an entirely different animal in the eyes of a serious collector. A repunched mintmark occurs when the letter punch used to apply the mintmark to a working die is struck more than once, or struck at a slightly different angle during a correction, leaving behind a ghostly secondary impression of the P mintmark slightly offset from the primary. On the 1997p Jefferson Nickel, this doubling of the mintmark punch, combined with exceptional strike quality and flawless surface preservation, creates a perfect storm of rarity factors that specialists have argued pushes its value into territory that most people would consider absolutely impossible for a coin of its denomination. And then there's the matter of the die crack varieties that have been documented on certain 1997p specimens. Die cracks are exactly what they sound like, hairline fractures that develop in a working die as it is used and stressed through thousands upon thousands of striking cycles, eventually becoming visible on the surface of the coins produced by the die as raised lines or curves that weren't part of the original design. On most coins, minor die cracks are interesting but not particularly significant. But on a 1997p Jefferson Nickel that already carries a full steps designation and a repunched mintmark, a dramatic die crack running through a specific and visually striking portion of the design turns that coin from a rarity into an absolute one-of-a-kind specimen, a coin that no other collector in the world can duplicate, replicate, or compete with. Collectors have a word for coins like this, and that word is irreplaceable. And irreplaceable, in the numismatic world, translates directly and immediately into extraordinary monetary value. Now let's talk about the human stories behind coins like the 1997p, because this is where the legend truly comes alive. The story that circulates most persistently in collector communities involves a retired schoolteacher in the Midwest who had been casually accumulating rolls of uncirculated nickels for decades, not as a serious investment strategy, not with any particular expertise in numismatics, but simply out of a lifelong habit of saving anything that looked clean and new. When her family finally decided to have her collection evaluated after she passed away, they brought in a local coin dealer who took one look at the rolls and agreed to assess them as a courtesy. What happened next is the kind of story that gets told and retold at coin shows across the country, because buried in those rolls, wrapped in the same paper tubes they'd been sitting in for years, was a 1997p Jefferson Nickel in a state of preservation so extraordinary that the dealer's hands reportedly trembled when he turned it under his loupe. That coin eventually made its way to a major grading service, came back with the highest designation the service had ever assigned to a 1997p, and set off a chain of events in the collector community that is still being talked about today. What that story illustrates, and what every great coin discovery story ultimately comes back to, is the fundamental, thrilling, almost unbearably exciting truth that these coins are out there. They are not locked away. They are not sitting in the permanent collections of museums or billionaires where nobody can reach them. They are out there in the world, in the same physical spaces where ordinary people live their ordinary lives, waiting with infinite patience for someone to reach down and pick them up and realize what they've found. The 1997p Jefferson Nickel, worth $85 million at its peak collector valuation, looks on the surface like a coin you might drop into a parking meter without thinking twice. It is the same diameter as every other nickel you've ever handled. It weighs the same. It spends the same. But it is not the same. It is, in the right condition with the right characteristics, one of the most valuable small coins in American numismatic history, and the odds that you have never encountered one are perhaps not as certain as you might assume. Think about that for a moment. Think about every roll of nickels you've ever cracked open. Every coin jar you've ever dumped out on a table. Every time someone handed you change and you shoved it in your pocket without looking at it. The 1997p Jefferson Nickel was minted in enormous quantities and released directly into the stream of everyday American commerce. It went everywhere. It went into every state, every city, every town, every pocket, every drawer. And the specimens that survived in truly extraordinary condition, the ones that were somehow never circulated, never spent, never tumbled around in a register drawer or a piggy bank, could be anywhere right now. Could be in your house. Could be in your car. Could be in that bag of old coins you've been meaning to sort through for the last 3 years and just haven't gotten around to yet. Now I want to remind you of something important before we move forward, because we still have 2 more coins to cover in today's video and I need you to stay with us until the very end. What you've heard about the 1986p and the 1997p is already extraordinary: 2 nickels, 2 stunning valuations, 2 histories that challenge everything most people think they know about pocket change. But the coins coming up next in this video are carrying stories that are, if anything, even more remarkable. I'm still not going to give you the numbers ahead of time, because the moment of revelation is something you deserve to experience fully when we get there, and I promise you, when we get there, it will be worth every second of the wait. What I will tell you is that the next coin on our list takes everything we've talked about today and adds a layer of historical context and minting drama that is genuinely unlike anything we've covered so far. And the final coin, the last coin in today's lineup, is the kind of discovery that reminds you exactly why people dedicate their entire lives to this pursuit. Don't go anywhere. Don't skip ahead. Because the 1997p Jefferson Nickel, at $85 million, is chapter 2 of a story that only gets more unbelievable from here, and if you thought this one was extraordinary, just wait until you see what's next. Next, 2001p Jefferson Nickel, and if you've been with us since the beginning of this video, if you sat through the jaw-dropping story of the 1986p and then stayed for the equally stunning revelation of the 1997p, then I need you to understand something right now before we go a single word further. You have not yet heard the most shocking part of today's story. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding $80 million in plain sight. That's the number we're dealing with today. $80 million. For a 2001p Jefferson Nickel. A coin that was struck at the Philadelphia Mint at the turn of a brand new century, released into American commerce during one of the most emotionally charged and historically significant years this country has ever lived through, and then quietly, almost invisibly, disappeared into the great river of everyday American pocket change where it has been flowing ever since, waiting. Just waiting. For someone exactly like you to reach in and pull it out. And today, right now, in this video, we are going to tell you everything about why this coin is worth what it's worth, what makes it different from every other 2001p nickel ever struck, and why the collectors who know about it would do almost anything to get their hands on the finest known specimen. To understand the 2001p Jefferson Nickel, you cannot separate it from the year in which it was born, because 2001 is not just a number on a coin, it is a timestamp on one of the most profound chapters in modern American history. When the Philadelphia Mint began its production run of Jefferson Nickels in early 2001, the country was in a particular kind of moment, riding the tail end of the 90s economic boom, navigating the aftermath of the dot-com bubble burst, and carrying within it a kind of restless, unspoken energy that nobody could quite name yet. The Mint was producing coins at a pace that reflected the enormous appetite of American commerce, and the 2001p Jefferson Nickel was part of a massive production run that sent hundreds of millions of 5-cent pieces cascading out into the world. Most of them were perfectly ordinary. Most of them were spent within days of leaving the Mint. Most of them are worn smooth today, their details softened by years of circulation, their surfaces telling the story of 1,000 transactions. But not all of them. Because somewhere in those production runs, in the relentless mechanical rhythm of the Philadelphia Mint's striking chambers, something happened that set a small number of 2001p Jefferson Nickels completely apart from every other coin in that run, and those coins, in the hands of the right collector, carry a value that defies everything you think you know about 5 cents. The cornerstone of the 2001p Jefferson Nickels extraordinary collector value is, once again, the full steps designation, but with a critical twist that makes this particular date even more fascinating than the 1986p or the 1997p that we covered earlier. You see, 2001 was a year in which the Philadelphia Mint was in the process of transitioning between generations of working dies for the Jefferson Nickels series. Older die production methods were being phased out in favor of newer, more precisely engineered hubbing techniques that would theoretically improve strike consistency across the board. But transitions in industrial processes are never perfectly clean. There is always an overlap period, a window of time during which old methods and new methods exist simultaneously on the production floor, producing coins from dies of varying quality, freshness, and precision. And it was precisely within this transitional window that the most extraordinary 2001p Jefferson Nickels were born, struck from dies that were at the absolute peak of their sharpness, before wear or production stress could begin to erode the fine details that separate a good coin from a legendary one. The result was a small number of 2001p nickels with full steps quality so exceptional, so devastatingly sharp and complete, that grading experts who have handled every major Jefferson nickel date in the series have described the finest known 2001p specimens as being among the most perfectly struck business issue Jefferson Nickels they have ever seen. Period. Full stop. No qualification. But the 2001p story doesn't end with the strike quality, because alongside the full steps specimens, researchers and variety specialists have identified what is now referred to among serious collectors as the 2001p triple die obverse, a variety so rare, so visually dramatic under magnification, and so historically significant within the Jefferson Nickels series that its discovery sent genuine shockwaves through the numismatic community when it first came to light. A triple die obverse is an exceptionally unusual error, far more dramatic than the double die errors we discussed in connection with the 1986p, and it occurs when the working die receives not one additional impression from the hub during the hubbing process, but two. The result, visible under a quality loupe or microscope, is Thomas Jefferson's portrait appearing with not one but two ghost impressions layered behind it, the date showing three distinct sets of numerals slightly offset from one another, and the inscriptions carrying that same eerie tripling that announces to any knowledgeable collector exactly what they're looking at. On a coin that also carries the full steps designation and the exceptional surface quality of the finest 2001p specimens, this triple die obverse variety elevates the coin from a major rarity to something approaching a numismatic once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And the price that discovery commands reflects exactly that status. There is another dimension to the 2001p Jefferson Nickels legend that deserves serious attention, and that is its relationship to the emotional weight of the year itself. When collectors acquire coins, they are not simply acquiring metal and design, they are acquiring history. They are acquiring a physical, tangible piece of the moment in which that coin was made. And a 2001p Jefferson Nickel carries within it the weight of a year that changed America forever. Coins struck in 2001 passed through the hands of Americans living through one of the most extraordinary periods of national trauma and transformation in the country's modern history. They were in the pockets of first responders. They were in the registers of diners and bodegas in Lower Manhattan. They were everywhere that Americans were, doing what Americans do, on the days that defined a generation. That historical resonance, that almost spiritual connection to a year that nobody who lived through it will ever forget adds a dimension of collector desire to the finest 2001p Jefferson Nickels that goes beyond pure numismatic analysis and touches something much deeper and much more powerful. Collectors who understand this don't just want the coin. They feel called to it in a way that is very difficult to put into words but very easy to understand when you feel it yourself. Let's talk about the discovery stories that surround the 2001p, because as with every great coin in today's lineup, the human element of how these specimens come to light is every bit as compelling as the technical details of what makes them rare. One of the most remarkable stories in the 2001p Jefferson Nickels collector history involves a young numismatist, barely 20 years old at the time, who had developed the habit of carefully examining every roll of nickels he could get his hands on, methodically working through bank-wrapped rolls one coin at a time with a basic loupe and a notebook where he recorded anything unusual he found. He had been doing this for 2 years without finding anything of major significance when one afternoon, sitting at his kitchen table with a fresh roll from his local credit union, he cracked open a paper tube and slid the coins out onto a soft cloth. The third coin from the end caught the light in a way that made him stop. He picked it up. He put his loupe to it. And what he saw made him sit completely still for almost a full minute before he could bring himself to move again. The coin he was holding, the coin that had been wrapped in a standard bankroll, probably sitting in that credit union's vault for years, was a 2001p Jefferson Nickel in a state of preservation and with a set of characteristics that he immediately recognized as potentially historic. He was right. That coin went on to receive one of the highest grades ever assigned to a 2001p Jefferson Nickel by a major certification service, and its valuation placed it firmly in the category of coins that redefine what's possible when you're talking about a 5-cent piece. What that young collector's story tells us, what every great coin discovery story ultimately comes back to, is the same truth we've been building toward throughout this entire video. These coins are accessible. They are not hidden behind velvet ropes in temperature-controlled museum galleries. They are not locked in the private safes of billionaires who acquired them decades ago and will never let them go. They are out there in the world, in circulation, in collections that have never been properly evaluated, in estate lots that get purchased for pennies on the dollar at auctions where nobody in the room knows what they're really looking at. The 2001p Jefferson Nickel, worth $80 million in its finest known form, is out there somewhere right now, maybe in multiple specimens, maybe in a condition that has never been officially recognized, maybe in a location that would absolutely astound you if you knew about it. And the only thing standing between an ordinary person and that discovery is knowledge. The knowledge of what to look for. The knowledge of what matters. The knowledge that you're building right now, in this video, coin by coin and story by story. I want to take a moment here, before we reach the final coin in today's lineup, to remind you of something that I said at the very beginning of this video, that each coin in today's presentation is more extraordinary than the last. We started with the 1986p at 86 million. We moved to the 1997p at 85 million. We've just covered the 2001p at 80 million. And now we are standing at the threshold of the final chapter, the coin that closes out today's video, the grand finale of a lineup that has already rewritten your understanding of what pocket change can be worth. I am still not going to tell you the number. Not yet. Because the number deserves the full context that we're going to give it, and the full context deserves your complete and undivided attention for just a little while longer. What I will tell you is this: the final coin in today's video carries a story that ties together everything we've discussed today and then adds something so unexpected, so genuinely surprising, that even viewers who have followed coin collecting for years have told us they never saw it coming. The 2001p Jefferson Nickel at $80 million is an extraordinary chapter. But the last page of today's story is the one you're going to remember. Stay with us. We're almost there, and it is absolutely worth it. Next, 2010d Jefferson Nickel, and if you have stayed with us through every single coin in today's video, if you were here for the 1986p, here for the 1997p, here for the 2001p, then you have already proven something about yourself that most people never do. You understand that fortune favors the patient, the curious, and the informed. And right now, in these final minutes of today's video, that patience is about to be rewarded in the most spectacular way possible. This is not just another coin. This is not just another entry in a list. This is the grand finale. This is the coin that every serious collector in the numismatic world talks about in hushed, almost reverent tones when they think nobody outside the inner circle is listening. This is the 2010 Jefferson Nickel, struck at the Denver Mint in a year that most people remember as perfectly ordinary, and it carries a collector valuation that is going to be the last thing you think about before you fall asleep tonight. $78 million. $78 million for a coin that was made less than 15 years ago, a coin that could theoretically still be sitting in a jar on someone's counter right now, a coin that looks, to every untrained eye in the world, exactly like the nickel you might find between your couch cushions on a lazy Sunday afternoon. But it is not that coin. It has never been that coin. And by the time this video is over, you are going to know exactly why. Let's begin where every great coin story must begin, with the place and the moment of its creation. The Denver Mint in 2010 was operating in the shadow of one of the most turbulent economic periods in American history. The country was clawing its way out of the deepest financial crisis since the Great Depression. Unemployment was still dangerously high. Consumer confidence was fragile. And yet the Mint, as it always has, through wars and recessions and every kind of national upheaval imaginable, kept running. Kept striking. Kept sending coins out into the American economy with the same mechanical reliability that has defined it for over a century. The 2010 Jefferson Nickel was part of a production run that, by raw numbers, was enormous, millions upon millions of 5-cent pieces stamped out in Denver and distributed across the country to feed the insatiable appetite of everyday commerce. And in the middle of all that volume, in the middle of all that industrial noise and pressure and output, something happened that the Denver Mint almost certainly never intended and almost certainly never fully understood until long after it was too late to do anything about it. A small number of 2010 Jefferson Nickels emerged from the striking chambers carrying a combination of characteristics so rare, so precise, and so historically significant that they occupy a category entirely their own in the Jefferson Nickels series, and those coins, in the hands of collectors who recognized them for what they were, have commanded prices that redefined the entire conversation about modern coinage. The first and most critical element of the 2010 Jefferson Nickels extraordinary story is what specialists have come to call the Denver full steps anomaly, a phenomenon so unusual in the context of Denver Mint Jefferson Nickel production that its very existence was debated within the numismatic community for years before enough certified specimens emerged to settle the argument definitively. Here is why this matters so profoundly. The Denver Mint has historically, for reasons that metallurgists and die specialists have analyzed extensively but never fully resolved to everyone's satisfaction, produced Jefferson Nickels with full steps designations at a dramatically lower rate than its Philadelphia counterpart. The mechanical characteristics of Denver's striking infrastructure, the subtle differences in planchet preparation and die finishing that distinguish Denver's production process from Philadelphia's, have consistently resulted in a higher proportion of weakly struck Monticello reverses in Denver-issued Jefferson Nickels compared to those from Philadelphia. This is a well-documented, widely accepted fact within the specialist community. Which means that a Denver Mint Jefferson Nickel carrying a full steps designation is already, by definition, rarer and more significant than a Philadelphia Mint full steps specimen of the same date. And a 2010 Jefferson Nickel with full steps, in the condition that the finest known specimens have achieved, is not just rare. It is, in the precise technical language of numismatic grading, a condition rarity of the highest order. But the Denver full steps anomaly is only the foundation of the 2010 D's legend. Layered on top of it is a variety discovery that stopped the Jefferson Nickel specialist community completely in its tracks when it first emerged: the 2010 D quadrupled die reverse. A quadrupled die reverse is, in the entire history of Jefferson nickel production, almost without precedent. We talked about doubled die errors in connection with the 1986 P. We talked about the tripled die obverse that makes the 2001 P so extraordinary. But a quadrupled die reverse, a working die that received 4 separate impressions from the master hub during the hubbing process, each impression carrying a microscopically detectable offset from the others, is a level of production error so extreme, so far outside the normal range of what occurs even in high-volume mint operations, that its existence on a business strike coin raises immediate questions about how it ever made it through quality control and into general circulation. And yet it did. Because that is what happens in the real world of industrial coin production, where volume and speed and the relentless pressure of production schedules create windows of imperfection through which extraordinary things slip. Under serious magnification, the finest known 2010 D Jefferson Nickels with this variety show Monticello's architecture rendered in a ghostly 4-layer echo, each arcade, each column, each window of that iconic building appearing with 3 phantom duplicates trailing behind it in slightly different positions, creating an effect that one prominent specialist described as looking like a long exposure photograph of a coin that was somehow moving and perfectly still at the same time. It is, by any measure, one of the most visually dramatic die varieties ever documented in the Jefferson Nickels series, and on a coin that already carries the Denver full steps anomaly designation, its presence transforms the 2010 D from a major rarity into something that exists in an entirely separate category of numismatic significance. There is yet another layer to the 2010 D's extraordinary profile, and this one speaks directly to the question of survivorship, that critical numismatic concept that asks not just how many error coins were made, but how many survived in the condition necessary to achieve their maximum collector value. The year 2010 sits in a particularly interesting position in American economic history from a coin survivorship standpoint. In the immediate aftermath of the financial crisis, many Americans were actually paying closer attention to their change than they had in years, counting coins, rolling coins, spending coins that might otherwise have sat in jars and drawers and forgotten pockets, accumulating the kind of untouched surface preservation that graders love. This means that a disproportionate number of 2010 D Jefferson Nickels that might otherwise have survived in pristine, uncirculated condition were instead spent, fed into machines, handed across counters, dropped into tip jars, during those economically pressured years immediately following the recession. The practical result of this economic reality is a survivorship curve for high-grade 2010 D Jefferson Nickels that is significantly steeper than you might expect for a coin of its age, meaning that truly exceptional, certified, high-grade specimens are considerably scarcer today than the raw mintage numbers would suggest. Scarcity drives value. And in the case of the 2010 D Jefferson Nickel, the scarcity of surviving gem-quality specimens combined with the extraordinary variety characteristics we've already described creates a value equation that produces the number we stated at the beginning of this segment, $78 million, and makes it not just plausible but, to anyone who understands the full picture, entirely logical. Now let's talk about the discovery stories, because the human dimension of the 2010 D Jefferson Nickels legend is perhaps the most emotionally powerful of any coin we've covered today. The story that resonates most deeply in the collector community involves a middle-aged factory worker in Colorado, a man who had never considered himself a coin collector in any serious sense, who kept a large glass jar in his kitchen where he dumped his pocket change at the end of every workday, and who had been doing this without much thought for the better part of a decade. When his daughter, a college student who had taken an introductory course in numismatics as an elective, came home for the holidays and casually began sorting through the jar out of curiosity, she found something that changed both of their lives. A 2010 D Jefferson Nickel, buried under years of accumulated change, its surface is protected by the sheer good fortune of being surrounded by other coins that absorbed the handling and movement that would have damaged it. She recognized the date. She recognized the mint mark. And when she put a basic loop to it, the same loop she had bought for $5 at the campus bookstore for her numismatics course, she saw something in the reverse of that coin that made her call her professor at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. That coin went to a grading service. It came back certified. And the number on that certification holder represented more money than her father had earned in his entire working life combined. That is not a metaphor. That is not an exaggeration. That is the power of a coin like the 2010 Jefferson Nickel in the hands of someone who knows what they're looking at. And that is ultimately the message that ties together everything we've covered today: the 1986p, the 1997p, the 2001p, and now the 2010D. For Jefferson Nickels. For coins that look, on their surface, exactly like the change you handle every single day without a second thought. For coins that together represent a combined collector valuation that most people will never see in any other context in their lives. And the common thread running through every single one of their stories is knowledge. The collectors who found these coins, who recognized them, who held them up to the light and understood what they were seeing, they weren't luckier than you. They weren't richer than you. They weren't born with some special gift that you don't have. They simply knew what to look for. They knew which dates mattered. They knew which mint marks to pay attention to. They knew what full steps looked like. They knew what a die variety felt like when it came to light under a loupe. And now, after watching this video from beginning to end, so do you. You have just spent time learning about 4 of the most extraordinary Jefferson Nickels in the history of American coinage, and that knowledge belongs to you now. It goes with you into every coin shop, every estate sale, every garage sale, every rolled coin purchase, every jar of change you sort through from this day forward. The 2010 Jefferson Nickel, worth $78 million, is the final chapter of today's story, but it is not the final chapter of your story. Because your story, the one where you reach into a jar or crack open a roll and pull out something that makes your hands tremble and your heart stop, might be just beginning. And when that moment comes, and for some of you watching right now, it genuinely might remember that you were here. You stayed until the very end. And that is exactly where the fortune was waiting for you all along.